Most people try to change their behavior by setting a goal: run a marathon, quit sugar, wake up earlier, and most people fail. Not because they lack willpower, and not because the goal was wrong. They fail because they are trying to change what they do without changing who they believe they are. That is the gap no productivity system talks about. Behavior follows identity. The question is never really, what do you want to do? It is, who do you believe you are? There is a moment most people recognize. You have tried to build a new habit before, maybe several times. You start strong, you slip, you restart with fresh resolve, and somewhere in the third or fourth week it dissolves again. You tell yourself you need more discipline, but discipline is not the actual problem. What is quietly running underneath every habit is a story you are telling about yourself. Not out loud, not consciously, but every time you skip the gym, a small voice says, "I'm just not the kind of person who does that." Every time you reach for something you said you would quit, the same voice says, "This is just who I am under pressure." These stories are not character flaws. They are how the brain conserves energy. Identity becomes a shortcut for behavior. This is where the research becomes uncomfortable. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, published in 2018, draws a distinction between layers of change. The outer layer is outcomes, what you want to achieve. The middle layer is process, the routines you follow. But the deepest layer is identity, who you believe you are. Most people try to change from the outside in. Clear argues that durable change runs the other direction entirely. You do not decide to write every day, because writing is on your to-do list. You write because you have come to think of yourself as a writer. That is the shift most goal setting completely misses. Picture someone who has been offered a cigarette at a party. One person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." Another says, "No thanks, I don't smoke." The words sound similar. The psychology is entirely different. The first person is fighting an urge. The second is reporting a fact about themselves. That small difference is the whole engine of identity-based change. Psychologists have a name for the pressure we feel to act in line with how we see ourselves. It is called self-consistency, and it operates almost automatically. When your actions contradict your identity, you feel a friction the mind urgently wants to resolve. When your actions confirm your identity, behavior becomes almost effortless. You are not resisting temptation. You are simply being yourself. What surprises me most about this line of research is how early it locks in. Work by Dweck at Stanford, developed across decades and consolidated in Mindset, published in 2006, showed that children labeled a maths person or not a maths person shaped their entire effort and persistence around that single label. The label comes before the behavior. Identity creates the ceiling before the child ever sits down to try. The same dynamic plays out in adult habit formation. When researchers study long-term behavior change in areas like exercise and diet, what consistently predicts sustained effort is not motivation in the conventional sense. It is whether the person has incorporated the behavior into their self-concept, whether they have stopped saying, "I exercise," and started saying, "I am someone who moves every day." That shift in language reflects a shift in the underlying story, and the story is what holds. Here is the part that most self-help framing gets wrong. You cannot simply decide to have a new identity and expect it to hold. Affirmations without evidence do not build conviction. They build a kind of hollow performance that collapses the moment life gets difficult. Real identity shifts are built from what Clear calls votes. Every time you act in accordance with the person you want to become, you cast one vote for that identity. One vote does not win an election, but 50 votes, 100 small consistent actions, and the evidence begins to accumulate. You are not trying to convince yourself of something abstract. You are pointing to a record that already exists. This connects to something William James, the American psychologist and philosopher, understood long before modern habit research caught up. Writing in The Principles of Psychology in 1890, James argued that habit is the flywheel of society. He saw repetition not as the enemy of growth, but as its foundation. The person you are becoming is assembled, quietly, from what you do when nothing feels urgent and no one is watching. The strange part is that the process does not require perfection. Missing once does not erase the votes already cast. What matters is the overall trajectory of the evidence. A person who meditates 6 days out of 7 is still becoming someone who meditates. A single missed day is noise. The pattern is the signal. This is why the obsession with streaks is psychologically backward. It makes one broken link feel like the whole chain snapped. Identity is far more durable than a streak counter suggests. But here is the part that took me the longest to accept. Changing your identity is not an act of self-rejection. It does not require you to condemn the person you have been. Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, first published in 1946, described the human capacity to choose a stance toward one's own situation as the last and most irreducible freedom. He was writing about survival under extremity. But the principle carries into ordinary life. You are not your past behavior. You are the person deciding what story to carry forward. That reframe matters practically. When you begin to see habit change as identity authorship rather than willpower management, the effort feels different. You are not white-knuckling your way through something you resent. You are gathering evidence for a person you are choosing to become. The concrete practice that follows is simpler than most systems suggest. Before you try to change a behavior, ask the prior question. Who is the person that would naturally do this? Someone who values their body. Someone who finishes what they start. Someone who reads before they scroll. Then take the smallest possible action consistent with that person. Not because one action changes everything, because one action is a vote, and votes accumulate. Over time, the gap between who you are and who you are becoming quietly closes. Not through discipline imposed from outside, through a self-concept that is slowly, verifiably becoming true. If this kind of thinking interests you, the psychology underneath the patterns you live by, there is a lot more to explore here. Subscribe, and you will get more of it, one careful piece at a time.